breaks. Many are preparing to once again brave a very long commute from the outer suburbs. But could making our cities more European with so-called middle density apartment blocks offer a better lifestyle? Well, that's the view of YIMBYs. That's right. Yes, in my backyard advocates that are pro-development, and the lead organiser Jonathan O'Brien joins us now. Jonathan, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
OK, so when you talk about European style and medium density, what exactly are you talking about?
Yeah, so we're talking about how the status quo in Australian cities is really these two housing typologies. We've got tall towers and then we have large swaths of suburban carpet, these sort of single-family detached homes with their own individual backyards. What we're talking about is this missing middle, the medium-density housing, sort of you're looking between 3 and 8 stories. 6 stories Parisian is sort of the level that we like to talk about. And that's really the type of housing that delivers livable places where you can have a lot of people but still a lot of room for parkland and amenity, and it's perfect for building around transit and existing infrastructure, and it's much more sustainable for everyone.
What are the main hurdles from your perspective to more of that being achieved, more of that housing being achieved?
Absolutely. So the main policy that we're really pushing for is zoning and planning reform. So right now in a lot of our inner cities, that goes for Melbourne, it goes for Brisbane, it goes for Sydney, it goes for every city around the country, we have these zones that essentially mean that in our inner cities, you actually can't build more than 2 stories in a lot of places. You can't build apartments around a lot of our transit, a lot of our infrastructure. It's why you see our CBDs go straight from towers down to that suburban carpet. So it's this zoning reform that we really need to see.
Is there appetite for that? Like, you know, obviously you're calling for it, you've got this organisation, you've got a group of people who support this issue, but is there appetite for that within governments, do you think, and local councils?
Yeah, I think absolutely there is. So we've seen it in Sydney with the recent upzoning announcement reforms from the Minns government, looking at, transit-oriented development, very similar to what we called for in the YIMBY Melbourne Missing Middle report. The Victorian government is also talking about this with reforming the Planning and Environment Act. There's a lot of appetite, largely because renters are now a plurality of voters, right? We're hitting a point where we've got 30 to 40% of people in Australia are renting, and renters are the ones being hit the hardest by the housing supply shortage. It's a political reality that politicians have to listen now.
Now, you're representing YIMBYs. There are no shortage of NIMBYs as well on the other side of this debate, not in my backyard, but coming at it from, they would argue, sound reasons. It's all about amenity, they would argue, and this brings into the discussion heritage protection. In a lot of suburbs, that is why people want to live in a lot of the inner ring suburbs of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Surely there's a case for protecting the heritage overlay of houses that deserve it and coming to some sort of compromise with medium density housing?
So what we see as kind of the actual good application of heritage is building spaces for civic engagement. So our iconic theatres, our iconic kind of exhibition centres, train stations, these are the places that we really want to protect because these are places where people can come together and meaningfully engage with the heritage. There's a case for high streets, right? These places where, again, they're thoroughfares, they're people. But what we need to look at is, okay, but what's the density away from these places? What's the heritage value of 2nd, 3rd, 4th Street back from our high streets, from our places of civic engagement? There's a real question about what value people are getting out of heritage protected homes that are environmentally unfriendly, that are expensive to heat, that are often sort of sitting there being rented out for very high prices, overcrowded and so on.
That are historic and they actually look good and they preserve the historical aspect of many of these neighbourhoods, so the argument would go.
So the argument would go, and the question is, are we trading off history for the well-being of future Melburnians, right? What does our heritage in the future look like? What does a future city of 10 million Melburnians, Sydney, Brisbane, growing the same rates, are we going to grow out unsustainably, as you said, sort of outer suburbs, or are we going to say, look, there are a lot of really beautiful buildings, and there are beautiful buildings that we can share, and there are beautiful streets that we can share and preserve. But do we need to lock up upwards of 50% of our suburbs in the inner city under these heritage overlays that are restricting people from living where they want to live? These are often weaponized to keep people out of suburbs and to keep suburbs locked in amber for the rich people who are already living there.
Okay, so you've released this report arguing your case for middle density living, for rezoning. You've got a lot of other policy changes in there that you want to see, like taxes, stamp duty. You want a big shake-up. What's your next step in this?
Our next step is remaining in constant conversation with all levels of government. So maintaining relationships and staying in touch with state government, federal government, local government. The reality is it's going to require everyone. The federal government can use incentives and immigration policy levers. State governments can set planning guidelines, and local councils can come together with a sort of a pro-housing, a pro-density and a pro-amenity look forward. And if we can get all governments aligned on this positive vision for a city that says yes, cities that say yes, a country that says yes to bigger, better cities, then I think we're going to have a win.
Well, it's certainly going to spark a lot of debate. Jonathan O'Brien, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear your views. It's not just an issue affecting Melbourne. We mentioned